Well, first and foremost, I'd like to thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Hey, I was kind of curious, where you train out of? Like what state?
I'm just north of Detroit in Michigan.
Okay. Is that a big area over there for bodybuilding or not so much?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we've always been pretty big into bodybuilding, with Linda Murray and now the current reigning um, female bodybuilding champ,
Mm-hmm.
Drea,
Mm-hmm.
Andrea Shaw, and then,
She's from that area?
oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay. I didn't realize that.
And
Yeah.
Nicole Wilkins is from here too, as well.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's a throwback name, Nicole
hmm
Wilkins. Yeah. So yeah, that's cool. So how did you get started with like training? Were you always athlete, or is that something that you kind of picked up later on?
I've always been an athlete. I've always been weightlifting because I
Mm-hmm.
was a gymnast growing up, and they had us weightlifting even as children. And then I got involved in bodybuilding in 2008 when I went to my girlfriend's show and saw all those girls on stage that had all this muscle. And I was like, that looks like me. And so I decided to do a show. And then eight
Mm-hmm.
weeks later, I got on stage. And
8 weeks later, so that quick, huh?
yeah, I mean, it was 2008. It was like, I feel like most people were just kind of stumbling, trying to figure out what they were doing on a local, like
Yeah, yeah.
no one, there weren't that many coaches around, and there was like one YouTube video for posing. That was it.
So like that's interesting. So most of the girls that I interview like in the fitness division like come from a gymnastics background. Do you feel like that's something that like is necessary to be competitive in this division, or is it something that, is it a division like someone can come in not having that background and still do well?
Yes, yes, absolutely. You do not need to do gymnastics to do well in fitness. A lot of girls with a dance background that do quite well in fitness, and
Hmm.
then, but I would have to say, in my personal opinion, and some people might disagree with me, I think that the girls who were cheerleaders do the best
Really?
because they have a better understanding of presentation and accuracy. They have a good combination of tumbling and showmanship as well.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
gymnasts, we tend to get really rigid and really like zoned in on what we're doing.
Hmm.
And so we tend to lack that stage presence. And then dancers have a ton of stage presence, but they kind of get stuck in just doing dance, and it's not dance.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So when you say that the gymnast kind of get like, focused on, like, are you saying that they're more like technique oriented, or their
yeah,
focus is strictly on like the technique, not so much on how it's presented?
they're strictly focused on physical technique and what they are performing with their bodies, not
Hmm.
necessarily with their facial expressions and
Hmm.
um, trying. And then the other part is that everything that we did in gymnastics was a point base. So every element that we did had a specific amount of points to it. So if it was a difficult move, the judges knew it was difficult. And so if you did it well, you performed it well, then you got the full points. It's a higher
Hmm.
amount of points because it's a difficult move. That doesn't translate on the stage though. So when you take that over to the stage, it's more about the wow factor. Did it look really cool? Some of the most simple movements can look super cool on stage and make
Hmm.
it look like it's amazing, but it's actually not that hard. And
Yeah.
some of the things that are extremely hard to do doesn't translate on stage as a wow factor. And so a lot of us
Okay.
girls will take things out of our routines because we already know that the judges, they don't fully understand the difficulty of that move, and
Hmm.
it didn't really it didn't really come through as that way.
Yeah, no doubt. That makes total sense because you're also, you're also in a position, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're potentially risking like injury for something that's not going to necessarily benefit you because not only are you performing, these routines and moves with difficulty on a stage, which is, also has its own problems, but then like your physique, you're prepping as though you're prepping for like a bodybuilding show. So
Mhm,
I'm sure there's like dehydrating factor, and then there's
mhm.
other factors that go into that. So I would think that kind of all plays into it too.
Definitely. Yeah. And it's actually that whole physique factor has transformed over the years. When I first got started, we still had the two piece and the one piece
Hmm.
and the routine. And I used to compete locally at a place called the Redford Theater. And we would have our stuff set up upstairs. I would run down, I'd do like my one piece posing, I run back up, I would put my routine outfit on, go down, do my routine, run back up, put my two piece on, glue on my nails, run back down. And so
That's
now they
wild.
have it set where it's just the two piece and it's just routine. They get our physique round in right away, and that way we can replenish our bodies to have
Yeah.
the energy that we need and the electrolyte balance that we need to perform our routine.
Yeah, because it's such a unique division. I mean, no one else
Yeah.
does what you guys do. You're so different from everyone else.
But if you really look back, it used to be 20 girls at local shows that would do
Hmm.
fitness. And
Hmm.
then because we were before figure, and figure
Hmm.
developed from fitness. And so it was massively popular back in the 80s and or the 90s and the early
Hmm.
2000s. And then after 2010, it just kind of slowly declined from there. And now here we are.
Yeah. What do you attribute that to?
Oh, I have my opinions that I don't know. It's good to talk about
Oh,
online.
yeah. Well, if hey, I'll I'll
I,
leave it. I'll leave it up to you to decide whether what you want to say and not say.
I
But
would say
mhm,
difficulty. It's difficult to do.
mhm,
Some of the girls would say to us that the physique round intimidates them, and then some people would say that the when they watch us pros on stage, like, oh well, I can't do that, and I have to explain to them, well, that's not your level yet. You would just be doing a local show and you would
mhm,
graduate, you would build,
mhm.
you're looking at pros. I don't expect that out of you. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, I think there's like an intimidation factor from young girls. They're just not. They don't see themselves successful in that role there.
yeah, I don't get it because I for my profession at home, I teach tumbling to
Mhm.
dancers and cheerleaders, and we're booming. Like I have thousands of kids that come in for private lessons to learn these moves. We're talking hundreds of thousands of girls that are in performance based, I wouldn't call it sports, but or sports arena,
Mhm.
dance, cheer, gymnastics. And then once they hit 18, it just kind of all disappears, probably because they go to college. But bikini came around and that became so much more popular. I really do think it's an attention factor.
Sure, sure. Well, I don't think there's any question that bikini is like probably, I would say they're still probably the most popular division. I was listening to a podcast, and it was mainly male bodybuilders that were talking, and they were saying things that I personally didn't see. Like I don't see that when I go to shows and things like that. They were talking about how like, well, uh male bodybuilding is still the draw, and I'm like, I'm not sure that it is. I think there's like niche people that are into like open bodybuilding, but I think bikini is way over, as far as popularity and mainstream popularity has overshadowed like most divisions. I mean, of course you have wellness coming in now that's got a lot of hype behind it. Um How do you
I
go ahead? I'm
I
sorry.
kind of agree with you. I felt the same thing. And then as I got far more involved in the IFBB, I started realizing that, yeah, bikini girls are cool to look at. The guys do like to look at them, but male bodybuilding, classic physique
Hmm.
far more outweighs the male opinion. Like they definitely would prefer to see what a man has been able to build, what a man has been able to do versus what a female has been able to do.
You think
It's
so?
very different. Yeah, I do.
Mm.
Especially like if you're in the gym and you talk to, other men who are lifting, everyone's much more interested and intrigued by what these men can do. I think maybe more classic physique now because bodybuilding has gotten so big,
Hmm. Hmm.
and then the
Yeah.
distended bellies has become kind of a turnoff, but men still look at that and go, wow, and the girls look at the bikini girls and go, wow. So maybe
Yeah.
maybe it seems like girls are like bikinis more popular because there's more girls,
Hmm.
and that's the intention is the girls are gonna look at girls, guys are gonna look at guys, you know what I
Sure.
mean? So
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think there's always a draw to that, like to that, like petite, like look, I mean, I think that's kind of like the overall, like a general look that people would appreciate, even though people are not like people, especially people that are not in the industry, like mainstream type of people,
correct. Yes.
um I mean, and I'll just give you like an example. I was talking to somebody and they pointed out to a girl that, was in decent shape, but I would never like really consider her like over the top muscular or even that much muscular. But they thought that she was uber muscular. And that's because like I'm surrounded by people that, compete. And for a normal person, like their idea of muscularity is so different, because they're constantly seeing people that are out of shape. So even somebody who remotely has some sort of muscle is like extremely muscular to them, and
Yeah.
it's just it's a weird dynamic between people that like work out and are into fitness and then people that are not.
Yes, it's all relative, right? That's the
Hmm.
strangest part of the
Hmm.
sport is what people see and what people think. And even when you're in it, like I think that I'm pretty small, and then I get on stage and I'm like, oh, I'm kind of one of the biggest girls. And so it's just strange to me how our perception.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I've come to kind of accept it. And I don't go out of my way to express like my surprise when people say that. I just understand that, like, okay, like you just
Yeah.
don't, you just don't see what I see. But I was kind of curious. Do you think you mentioned about like just male bodybuilders getting bigger? Do you feel like that's like a problem or a trend in all divisions? Like everyone is getting
Yeah.
bigger?
Yeah. I don't know. It's curious to me that they just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Um, I I don't know. I don't like that everything just keeps getting bigger. It just seems to me like every time a division gets too big, they develop a new division
Hmm.
to try to bring down what was too big. Especially a really good case would be women's physique, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You look at like Dana and Bailey back in the day, and um, she looked great. Loved
Hmm.
it. Everyone loved Dalen Bailey. Like she would like exemplified the perfect balance of musculature and beauty, and her posing was great. And then you look at the classic physique today, and it's almost bigger than what bodybuilding used to be for women. So
Absolutely. It's like you said, it's a pretty much bodybuilding, just maybe a tinge different, but for the most
yeah,
part, I mean, when Shanique Grant came and then Sarah Beater, I mean, these are all like relative, these are pretty muscular women, like,
yeah,
to the point where, you have to kind of ask yourself, like, what division is this now? And Yeah, it's can anything like be done about that? I mean, what do you have any ideas?
I think that the only thing you can do is from the judge's perspective, they just need to be more finite in their judging. And I think the other problem that exists is it's always going to be who is the best on stage at that day, on that
Mhm.
day. And so, um, and you have the, trying to be lean and trying to be big at the same time. If you got someone on stage that's more lean, they're going to pick them. And it kind of all morphs from that. The judges pick the best person on stage that day. Everyone looks at that person and says, I can beat that. They try to beat it. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does. It does. That is a problem, right? Because you might have somebody who's like genetically like a better fit for a division, but they might not come in shape or in the best shape. And so you have someone else who's maybe bigger than that division would normally want, but because that person is in fantastic shape and great condition, is everything looks great on them, they have to pick it because it doesn't, you can't give it to somebody who's not in shape, and
Yeah, you
yeah,
said it
yeah.
better. That's exactly what I was trying to
No, no,
say.
I completely get,
Yeah.
I completely get what you're saying. It's such a like dilemma to be in, because then it perpetuates the cycle of
Right.
continuously getting bigger. I mean, I feel like that's happening just across the board, but and
Mhm.
every once in a while you have somebody come in who's not, and they do okay, and they do, decently well, but for the most part, that's kind of like where the trend is going.
Yeah. 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 I feel like if the judges were more vocal, or had more defined standards, I think that would help. Because
Hmm.
there's a lot of people that just don't understand at all. And everyone who doesn't understand, they're trying to make sense of it. And so they will vocalize it.
Hmm.
And so I
Hmm.
feel like if the judges, spoke up more about
Right.
things, it would help. Or maybe had a little more finite judging standards that would help as well. So
Yeah.
it's hard for like someone like me, when I'm surrounded by men in the gym and they see I go and compete and I come back and they're using the men's bodybuilding standards for my physique, and they can't understand. And so
Hmm.
that's the hardest part, is trying to explain to them standards for females. And then in my division in fitness, there's even less. It's very confusing. So
Hmm.
I'm not really sure what to say to that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough predicament to be in. So are you? And I think you kind of like hit on it a little bit. Are you against, and that might be too hard of a word, too harsh of a word, but are you against new divisions, or are you just saying that they should just make sense when you make them? They shouldn't be because other divisions are just over, spilling over.
Yeah, I really like the divisions that we have.
Hmm.
Um, I really like it. I think that if they just defined it better,
Hmm.
I think that would help a lot. I really like bikini, wellness, figure, physique,
Hmm.
bodybuilding, fitness. I really like it. I think it gives a good outlet for a lot of different physiques. And especially like when they brought wellness on, I thought that was fantastic. So
Yeah.
you had girls that were just a little bit smaller on top, huge bottoms, but too muscular for bikinis. Perfect, right?
Yeah.
And then yeah, I think I don't know really what's going on with figure, but I mean if you had I really do like each division. And for men's, I don't know too much about the men's.
Hmm.
I don't have too much opinion about it. Um, but I
Yeah.
think if they just define their standards better, I think that would help people move in the direction of professionalism.
Yeah. I mean, to your so there's a couple of things I wanted to mention. One is that figure, that you mentioned figure, that was a doozy what like was going on with the Arnold. I remember because I went to this last Arnold. I don't know if you were there, but when they pulled figure from that, and the the feedback that they gave on why they pulled it, it really kind of wrecked that division as far as like their just they just couldn't comprehend like the response from from the Arnold people and so forth. That I believe it was something to the effect of it just wasn't. What did they say specifically? I don't know if you remember, but it was
I don't remember, but I thought it had something to do with the direction that it's going if they didn't agree with it, something like
yeah,
that.
something to that effect. But anyways, they just it kind of put the kibosh on like figure. And I'm curious now, like with that kind of statement, and will you have like girls wanting to jump into a division like figure? Are they gonna start looking at other divisions that are more popular? um yeah.
Yeah. I feel like for figure, it's a lot of work for such little posing.
Hmm.
I am surprised in the direction that it has gone, especially when you compare it to the days of Nicole Wilkins and Aaron Stern. My girlfriends and I, who have been in the industry for a long time, we all comment on it a lot that, bikini is the new figure.
Hmm.
And so that's where I feel like figure gets lost. It's a very difficult division to be in. It's difficult standards to fulfill, and then you have to be that lean for to be on stage for 30 seconds, whereas like
Sure.
women's physique, they get tons of stage time and
Mm.
tons of different poses, and so yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know what they're gonna do.
It's interesting. I never thought about it that way. That's a good point. I mean, they're in and out. They're just
Hmm.
like in and out, and that is a lot of work, like you said, to have that kind of physique for just a few seconds of stage time. It does feel kind of, just a letdown a little bit.
But for a lot of girls who do figure, they like the more structured look of it. They like that it's not too feminine, like bikini, too
Mm-hmm.
feminine. So figure girls generally do not see themselves as bikini girls at
Mm-hmm.
all. But because physique is just getting so big, they don't really want to go to
That,
that standard.
yeah.
So figure's perfect for them.
Yeah, a while back I had Missy on, and one of the things that she's competed, I think, a couple of times in figure as well. And one of the things that she was mentioning, if I remember correctly, was that she said, it's a good outlet for like a fitness competitor when they're at a point in their career where they don't want to do a lot of that physical, movement, and they could just go to figure because the physiques are very similar, if not
Yes.
identical.
Yes.
And I feel like that's something that's interesting, to think
Mhm.
about. It's like you can, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
You're right, absolutely. And there's a good example. Allison Burns, I think is her name. She's going to go to the Masters Olympia with me. Got her pro card into fitness. Did a couple of years in fitness in the IFBB, and then switched over to figure.
Hmm.
The only issue I personally would have, and a few other girls would have, would be that fitness develops a very thick waist because in order to do a lot of these movements, your core has to be very well defined, dense, and strong. And so figure is starting to go towards that X frame. And,
Hmm.
I know that I will never do well in figure.
Yeah, it gets hard. The waist is, it's one of those parts of the body that it's like it's hard to bring it back down, especially as the older you get. you
Hmm.
know yeah, it's a yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I didn't realize you said you're going to the Masters Olympia.
Yes,
So is
yes,
this
for
the one
fitness.
is it Romania? Is that
Yes, in
right? Yeah.
Romania. It's in almost 4 weeks.
Oh, that's exciting. So
Yeah.
you're right in the towards the end now. Like you've got 4 weeks left.
Yeah, so I just competed in Vancouver last weekend,
Hmm.
and then I'm actually sitting here printing out my contract for the Tampa Pro. So I plan on
Oh,
jumping
okay.
to Tampa next week,
Okay.
and
That's
then we
exciting.
should be, coasting right into Romania.
Hmm. So what's your goal? Are you trying to hit as many shows as possible, or you just you want to get a win and then kind of shut it down?
I would I would love to go to the Olympia at least one more time in my career.
Mm-hmm.
I had said I had torn a labral tear. I suffered a labral tear back in last year for the Olympia, and so it took a long time to figure that out. And then I had said, okay, well, we'll just do a couple of like cortisone injections and get me through this year. I had always said, we'll just do the Masters Olympia and Vancouver, or vice versa, Vancouver Masters Olympia. And
Mm-hmm.
then I said I was done. I said if I'd made it to the Olympia, great. If not, I'm retired. I'm happy.
Mm-hmm.
We have 5 children, and I'm like, I'm ready to go travel with my kids and do stuff with the family and do other things with the business. And I was ready, right? Said all of that. And
Yeah.
then I went into Vancouver and I presented decent. And I was like, all right, we got Master Olympias coming up. That's great. Then Chicago happened, and my own coach won the Chicago Pro Show.
Oh wow. Okay.
And she's had a rough few years, and so it means a lot for her to go back to the Olympia. And I would absolutely love to be at the Olympia with my coach, competing with her on stage.
Yeah, that would be exciting. So are you for sure 100% after this year, whatever happens, you're retiring, or are you gonna continue to try to push?
Probably for the most part, I'm
Mm-hmm.
probably done. I with my hip injury, I discovered at the age of 43 years old that I have genetic hip dysplasia,
Oh man.
which never knew my entire life. And then, but it made a lot of sense. And then, so I have looking at hip replacements.
That's my 43 is, fairly young for hip replacements. Have you talked to any physicians yet about it?
Yeah, yeah. I've
You
had a
have?
couple. I've had 2 opinions. One
Uh-huh.
just says replace. One just says fix the labral tear. The other one says full hip replacement, just
Uh-huh.
because it's going to happen anyway. And the way that they made the way they do these hip replacements nowadays, in the past 10 years, the technology has greatly advanced. So it's interesting because a lot of people I know in their 40s and early 50s are getting hip replacements now. And
Hmm.
every single one of them says that they're happy that they did it. So, so
Yeah,
it's,
that's funny. My father in-law is actually like ironically getting one here next month. And so like but he's a little bit older like
right.
but yeah, so me and my wife are both in the medical field and she was saying she works in a hospital and she was saying that um they get her like they get people up out of their beds pretty quick after like hip replacements and things like that because they don't want you to be laying around for 2 months. So like the recovery time is much faster than it ever
Yeah.
used to be. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm hoping, because what is it? Ronnie Coleman had a couple, he had his hip replaced, right? Both of
Hmm.
them. And then he had some
What hasn't
complications.
Ronnie had done? Ronnie had everything done.
He did so much done. And then I remember like one of the shows, he like got wheeled out. I think it was one of the Olympias a few years ago.
Mhm.
So I think that kind of scared a lot of people, but he had some
Yeah.
complications from his surgeries. And then I don't know if the technology that they use on him is the same that they're using nowadays, but it seems like it's drastically different.
Sure, sure. There's definitely like advancements in that, but yeah, and Ronnie, I'm not sure. Like I talked to Ronnie for a little while with this at this Arnold last Arnold, and he wasn't in a wheelchair, but he was like using what do they call those like crutches type of crutches that like they kind of go over your arm, like you hold
Oh
on to
yeah.
them.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I do believe that like sometimes when you have other issues, like because he has a lot of back problems too, like you might not get the same results, but with you being mostly healthy, except for that issue, I think your recovery would be pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
We'll see. We'll see. Well,
yeah,
I just kind of live my life as, one day at a time. We'll see what happens next.
sure, sure. I was looking at just real quick, I was looking at your Instagram and I'm gonna pull it up here just for a
Hmm.
sec. So this is you in in the Vancouver, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a really good look. In you know, I mean that to me that's like an Olympia level look right here. Like that's you know, hard to argue against.
Yeah, I like that pose a lot.
Hmm.
So that's a new pose I implemented, but
Okay. What made you decide to do that pose?
I don't even know. I just was messing around one day and I was like, "Oh, that looks nice."
Hmm. Yeah.
These are fun.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Are you feeling like, you know, it might be kind of like a strange question, but are you feeling different now as you're a little bit older than, you know, you used to be? Are these movements, you know, have become more difficult for you, or are you at this point you're so proficient at it, it doesn't phase you?
Um, Things have become a little bit more difficult because I did put on a lot of muscle since the
Mhm.
beginning. So when I first started, I was 128 pounds, and now I'm on stage between 140 and 142.
Yeah.
So it's a decent amount, and that's hard to do. And then
Hmm.
I'm also 43. That's also becoming a little bit harder to do. Like getting warmed up, getting stretched
Hmm.
out, all of that takes several rounds to do before I can
Yeah.
start performing. And then, you know, you get plagued with board tendonitis. It's just these stupid minor little injuries that kind of make a little annoyances throughout the
Right.
day.
Right. It makes
And that
things
stuff
kind
can
of
be
difficult.
compounding.
Yeah, yeah. It just makes things as like the best way I like described it to somebody is I still like enjoy training, enjoy working out, enjoy doing all these things, but it's not as smooth anymore for me. I'm a little younger. I'm 38, but not by much. And it's like, you know, the differences between in my 20s and in my late 30s is what you just said. It's those I can't say that I have like major injuries, but it's always these problematic things that make
Yeah.
working out a little bit more difficult than it, you
Yes.
know. So
Yes.
if you let it, it'll take the joy out of it, you know.
That's true. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. But I mean, I remember even as a child, knee pain, back pain. And so even as a child, I learned how to endure those minor
mhm,
pains while
mhm.
still doing everything that I wanted to do. I remember older people saying to me, like, oh gosh, child, like your knees hurt, wait till you're 40.
I know.
And so I waited till I was 40. And the funny thing is my knees got better. But yeah, you learn to like, even as a child, I learned to deal with those things and just
Right.
keep moving, keep going, and keep
Yeah.
having a positive outlook on it.
I mean, I think that's also part of like what you people might call like a championship mentality, right? It's like somebody who can just endure and keep, you know, progressing forward. And that's if you
Yes.
have that, then, you know, that's number one. That's most important. Everything else will fall in line.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah, it's a good way of putting it.
yeah, I was so, you know, like looking at those pictures, and I definitely see you've got, you know, you got a pretty, you know, muscular physique. How do you train, you know, nowadays? Are you still like heavy? You know, you still go super heavy, or is it more like a volume workout?
Uh, I feel like the last couple of weeks, just the last couple of weeks, I feel like it's been a few days or 2 days out of the week, I'll have some actually really good, strong lifts. But then the other days of the week, I've never said this before, but I come in and I go, I think I'm just gonna get a pump today. I'm just gonna do a pump. Really? Just do a pump? Okay. And then, and then you know, I might slowly progress my sets into a heavier set instead of, you know, a
Hmm.
faster progression to the heavier sets. But I
Yeah,
still do body part per day, um, and I still get all my cardio in. But yeah, most of the time it's somewhere between moderate to heavy and
yeah.
body part per day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough sometimes. Like you might come in and say, okay, I'm gonna take it light, but then especially if it's like you start feeling a little better during the workout, the weight just tends to rise. Like this, it's hard to just keep it like at a low level, you know. So
That's actually a really good point because I've been thinking about that lately, especially given the way that I was judged at this last show for my physique. It felt like they told me I needed to build abs, and then they told me I needed to build chest, but it just felt like the way I was judged that I had too much based on who was placed ahead of me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so I thought about it and thought about it, and I really enjoy lifting,
Mm-hmm.
really enjoy this sport. And I feel like this sport gave me that outlet for my enjoyments. And I don't think I could ever dumb down my lifts. I don't think I could ever put myself into atrophy to fit their standards. So I'm just gonna keep trucking away, trucking along the way I
Yeah.
am, and keep myself happy.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's a fantastic idea. And it is, so that is very strange that they would say that you need to work again, I mean, I'm only looking at pictures, but I mean, I don't see that. Like, I don't see where you need more of anything, it's like, I mean, I think that's a pretty complete, physique. So,
I don't know if
yeah.
I posted pictures. I don't think I posted my back shot. I do
Mhm.
have very large glutes, and they tend to
Mm,
overpower my physique.
okay.
So the only other critique that they gave me was that I had some loose skin under my glutes, which I pretty much dismissed because, like I said, I'm 43 and I have 5 children, so that's just part of life. And
Right, right. Yeah.
it's more of just I had a little too much fat on my glutes, so it definitely wasn't the Olympia physique. I was 3 pounds up from my Olympia physique. It's drastically different, the
Mhm.
photos. So, but you know, we'll see what happens. If I do make it to the Olympia, we'll get back down there.
Yeah, I mean, the skin issue is a tough one for anyone. As you get, I mean, your skin's going to look different, at 20 or 25 as you do at 43. It's there's not a whole lot you can do. I mean, the only thing that I think that you could do, but I don't know if that's the best thing for you to do, is to put on more muscle to tighten the skin. But then it's like, but then you run into other problems. So what's,
Right.
right, right. So yeah, I mean, yeah, that's interesting. And so the Masters Olympia is going to be fun. Have you been to Europe in the past?
I've been to Europe one time, went to
Hmm.
Belgium, Amsterdam, France. That was a lot of fun. So, my husband and I haven't been married that long, and he's never been. He's going to go with me, and we are so excited.
So
So excited.
you're gonna make like a vacation out of it?
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I'm working with another bodybuilder friend who owns her own travel agency. And
Okay.
so we're mapping out all of Romania. We're gonna go visit, Bronze Castle, the Dracula's castle.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
so he's
Yeah.
so excited.
Yeah, yeah, that's exciting. Yeah, yeah. While we're talking about that, I just remembered what I wanted to say when you mentioned about atrophy, like not atrophying yourself for the sake of like fitting into a class. I was just talking to someone, a wellness girl, and we were talking about how like some people, specifically, we're talking about somebody who was trying to fit into a bikini class, but it could really be, for anything, any division, and how like some people would stop, like they would have to stop training a body part completely to fit into a class. And I was just, I guess you do what you want to do, but for me that's kind of hard to accept,
Yeah.
because it's like, I thought the whole point is to, work out, like to, if you're telling me that in order for me to be like do better, I have to actually stop working out, like that's counterintuitive to like what this whole thing is, to me. I don't know.
I mean, that's a good point. There's the girls that come to me, they say, should I wear a waist trainer, for instance?
Hmm.
And I said, well, I mean, you can, but the only person that really worked for would be the girl in the Guinness World Book of Records who wore the waist trainer
Yeah.
24/7 and
Yeah.
had her ribs removed, like the bottom rib. So
Yeah.
that's like asking your waist to go into atrophy, and you have to wear it 24/7 because then
Right.
you eventually move your organs up or down to get that to work. And that's what people don't understand is and then you have to like pretty much just do stuff in machines, because if you do any compound lifting where your body
Right.
is required, core control, then that defeats the purpose.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. No, absolutely. And you made a really like good point. I say the same thing to people that ask me about waist trainers. I'm like, so what is your definition of do they work? Because if you're I mean, could they make your waist smaller? There is a potential for that, but again, we have to wear it all the time, and the results of that is going to be your organs are getting moved around. That's it's a corset, is what it is. It's a you
Hmm.
ever seen women wear corsets back in the day? Like that's what you're doing. You're wearing a corset all the time,
Right.
and so
Right.
and it's is that the route that you want to take? I mean, personally, I would say no, but
Yeah.
everybody's make their own decisions. But
But,
yeah.
but what is really cool though is the way the body can respond to specific training. So, for
Mhm.
instance, doing vacuum work can greatly, decrease your waist,
Mhm.
especially if you're a girl that's in like wellness or bikini, because you can pose in a manner that
Mhm.
makes your waist look even smaller.
Right.
Right. So whenever girls ask me about waist trainers, I point them to vacuums. I say, work on
Right.
your vacuums. Because even if like you don't do bodybuilding in just everyday life, I tell everyone to work on vacuums, especially if you had children, work on vacuums.
Right. And it's a control thing too, right? Like you can control your midsection. And if you really think about it, speaking strictly from like an aesthetic point of view, most people, let's just not take bodybuilders, let's take everyday people. Like, when do they want to have like a smaller waist? When they're on the beach, when they're like showing off their body. That's where control of your waist like comes in. I mean, most people try to tighten up themselves when they walk around on the beach, like, but but it's like if you have that control you can do that, but and it's just one of those things where it's like it's so important. And if you're competing like you said, I mean, in poses, like you're creating that look in that specific pose, so it's you really got to have that control. That's one of the problems that plagued the men's divisions is they would let their waist out all the time, and it's just looked so bad, to the point where like even Arnold, mentioned it a few years ago. Like that was one
Yeah.
thing that he really like, didn't like.
Yeah. I remember him saying that. And I don't disagree with him at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
belly
Again,
bloat. I
yeah.
I remember when I first got started and I went to the Arnold with a bunch of friends, and they had been in the bodybuilding scene for a while, and we were just walking around, and some photographer stopped some random guy who looked fat to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I thought he was fat. And the guy says, hey, can you take off his shirt and can you flex for me? And the guy's like, yeah, sure. And he throws off his shirt and he just starts flexing. And then he pulled his stomach in. And I turned to my friend and I was like, what was that? Why was his belly so big? And then when he flexed, it went away. And he turns to me and he says, and I'll never forget this. It's like, so you take growth hormone, everything grows, including your
Yeah.
intestines. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a real thing. It's a real thing. It's it's a real problem too. And this is like feels like this is like going to be another podcast, but
Yeah,
the
sorry.
abuse. No, you're fine. But it's the abuse of PED, specifically in this case, like growth hormone. It'll cause that. It's
Mhm.
there's like therapeutic doses, and then there's extreme doses, and so. And of course, you know as well as I do, people, if they can take a little, they'll take more, so,
Yep.
and there's consequences for all that stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah.
unfortunately, and that's the crazy thing. It's like you'll see this huge stomach, and then you'll see outlines on the stomach that's like
Right.
huge, so it's wild. The
Super
look is
strange.
wild, yeah, for sure. So anyways, but well, I appreciate your time. It was a really like good chat. I mean, discussed a lot of interesting subjects. If somebody wanted to reach out for you for like maybe like coaching, nutrition, or maybe just invite you to another podcast, what would be the best way for them to do that?
They can reach out to me on Instagram,
Okay.
Stephanie Jones Fit, all one word, and that'd be great.
Awesome. And I'll put everything at the bottom of this video to make it easier for you just to click on it and reach out to Steph. So again, thank you so much for your time, and
You're
you have a
welcome.
great rest of the day.
Yes, you too. Thank you so much.
Take
Take
care.
care.
Bye bye.
Bye.